Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week it is the start of September and I'm going to be trying to focus on reading the books that I need to read for the Orilium Readathon. Although I do still have an audiobook from last week that I will be continuing, so that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. When I went into this, thought it was going to have some kind of sci-fi element to it, but mostly it seems to be, I'm not sure if it's a romance, but more of a character story about these young people reuniting after having a falling out when they were young, and then they're making games together. It's a lot about the creative process of making games, as well as like their difficult relationship, which to be honest is quite frustrating to read. I'm also frustrated because it's kind of being written as a historical fiction, even though it's set at the same time as when I was at university and these kids start out in university. So now I've realized my whole life is historical fiction. But anyway, I will be continuing that. I don't know if it's going to be a favorite, but I want to try and finish that off before I read Dragonfruit by, I keep forgetting the author's name. And I also, before I sat down, didn't make the effort to remember what Orilium reading prompt I'm reading this for. Oh, it was the one where you have to read a book that was published in your birth month, and this was published in April of this year. So this one is written by a Pacific Island author, and every time I try to explain the plot, I know I'm doing a bad job of it, so let me start listening to it, and then I'll try and do a better job of it. The other thing I'll be reading this week is The Wisdom of Crowds by Abercrombie. This is the last book in the Age of Madness, and I'm very glad actually to be at the end of this series, because even though I really loved the First Law trilogy, and I did like some of the standalones, other ones I didn't like as much, and then the Age of Madness trilogy hasn't been my favorite. It's kind of set in like an industrial revolution type time, and we're following a lot of leaders of these different kingdoms as there's kind of this, well, they're still having battles with each other and like power plays, but as well there's kind of this uprising of the people, which in this third book I think is really going to come to a head. But I have actually already read 50 pages of this, and to be honest, it hasn't been my favorite. He sometimes does this thing, well actually almost always does this thing where there's a big battle and he will just jump around in different people's heads and none of those characters really matter. And I felt like the beginning of this has been really repetitive in terms of the themes and the ideas that it's trying to express. And I just want to get into the plot and find out what's happening with our main characters. And I don't know, like I would have thought like an uprising of the people could be a really interesting twist on like fantasy books where we normally focus on like the more noble royal characters. So it'd be interesting to see all these just random people rising up and trying to change the way things work. But the way it's being presented, I'm not really liking it. But I will admit, so far in this trilogy, I've tended to struggle to get into them and then have enjoyed the ending. So we'll see if I like the ending of this one. It is going to take me a while to get there because this is 500 pages, but I really want to try and finish this week. So wish me luck. Okay, so I don't seriously think that this audio is going to be usable, because the main road's too busy, but there's no wind, so maybe. Anyway, I have just finished listening to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and like, it was fine. I kind of, like, I like the characters. Like, no, did I find them incredibly frustrating? Yes, but there was some kind of like realism feeling there, and I enjoyed all the stuff about the creative process and friendship, and there's stuff about chronic illness and culture. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff in it, and I can see how people who like contemporaries would get a lot out of it, I guess. But I personally, I don't know, it's not that I was bored, but also that I was bored. I think it was fine, but I personally am a fantasy sci-fi girl, and so I need something else to the story. I feel like I should turn this camera around so you can see the river if I am going to use this footage, which I'm probably not. Hang on. Really, the only other thing I really have to say, like nothing else about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, it was fine. That's the main thing I'm going to take away from it. I'm probably going to forget the whole thing. So the other thing, last night I tried really hard to get to page 200 of The Wisdom of Crowds, and I could not do it. I'm just like, I don't know, I don't think it's to the same quality as some of the other stuff by Joe Abercrombie that I've read. Like, I don't feel like the humor is as strong. I don't feel like the character development is as strong. I don't feel like there's as many lines that like just truly capture the awfulness of the world. It's just kind of boring. It's a lot of politics and just like really hammering home this message that it doesn't matter who's in power, it's gonna be shit no matter what. And it just feels like the same thing over and over and over. And I'm not liking it, and I just want the characters to do something more, but maybe they're going to do something soon. I will keep pushing through. Like, this is the last book in a series. I'm not going to DNF it. I want to know how it ends, but also I read some reviews and it doesn't look like it has a satisfying ending, but I'll try to still have hope. Firstly, I do want to apologize for the sound of the wind in the last clip. I think it wasn't like too bad, but let me know if you think it's unacceptable to be on the internet. As well, it's so windy today that I worry that you're going to be able to hear the sound of the wind even though we're inside today. I do have plans to try and improve my audio, but it kind of has to wait until I sell my house and I can afford to do anything because I can't really at the moment. But anyway, reading wise, I have managed to get halfway through and then my camera battery died, which is very annoying also. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, The Wisdom of Crowds. I did get halfway through it, and finally we're getting a little bit of a plot. It's very exciting. I'm actually starting to get interested. I feel like though that the first half was just like too much of the same. One thing I do wonder, I see so many people saying that they think the Age of Madness is the best of the whole series, and I disagree. I loved the first Lore trilogy the most, and then maybe even looking back on it, Best Served Cold. But the Age of Madness trilogy, like the second book was okay, but in general it just hasn't been doing it for me. And I wonder, I do think most of the people I've seen raving about it are Americans, and I wonder if it's something to do with the politics being more aligned with like American politics. I wonder. Anyway, for me, I'm just glad that there's a bit of a story actually happening now, and I'm still hopeful that we'll get some magic in this series because so far, nothing at all. Like, I read fantasy for the magic, so where is the magic? I'm going to keep waiting, but I don't know if I'm going to get what I'm hoping for. The other thing I have been reading is Dragonfruit. So I started it on my run yesterday after I talked to you, and I think I'm about a quarter of the way through. So this is a story about this young woman, and she is out, I don't know, I think she's just trying to study these sea dragons, but there is this whole story around how you can take the dragon eggs and use them to, I think the wording is actually undo a great sorrow or your greatest sorrow, but there will be a cost. So as it turns out, there was this whole thing in the past where this princess had ended up in a deep sleep, like Sleeping Beauty styles, and the queen was going to use one of these eggs to save her, but this other girl that we're following, her father stole an egg and used it to save her instead when she was really sick. And so I think there's going to be a whole thing where she's actually trying to get an egg that can be then used to save the princess because she feels guilty that she was saved instead. So it does seem as well like she has some connection that we don't fully understand with this royal family. And we are actually also getting chapters of the prince, his perspective. I will say I feel like they've cheaped out on the audiobook a little bit because we've only got a female narrator for the whole story, and I prefer, if we're going to have like the male perspective and the female perspective, to have two different narrators so that there's a bit more clarity about the differences. I also think we're getting like different timelines, like sometimes we're going back into the past, and because I'm listening to the audiobook I can't tell. I could probably if I paid more attention, but also it hasn't been really pulling me in, so I probably haven't been paying as much attention as I should. But we're also getting kind of bits of the past that maybe are giving you some insights into that connection. And I'm not sure if it's different chapters, but I'm not, like, I'm getting confused sometimes about what timeline we're in. I will say as well, so the reason I picked this up, because I was very excited to get a Pacific Islander authored story. I think in my TBR I made it out like it was all because, you know, of the stats, but it's also because I really want to get those perspectives of people who live around me. But what I realized, because I did some research finally, is the author is actually from Guam, but now lives in America. And what I didn't realize is Guam is actually like very Americanized. And so for me, most of the Pacific Islands that I'm aware of, or, you know, the ones that are close to New Zealand, I think they're not that similar. Like, obviously there's some overlap in the mythology and just general island life. But I feel like for me, this story is a little bit Americanized, or a little bit, I never like to say it, but I always end up saying it in my head, generic fantasy, which isn't really what I was looking for in this series. And as well, the audiobook narrator sounds very American. I looked it up. She's Hawaiian. And with the author actually kind of living in America and being from America, Pacific Island, I feel like I'm not getting what I was really looking for in this book, but I do still want to see where it goes. I have seen criticisms of this book saying that, you know, it's talking a lot about these sea dragons being hunted and all their body parts being used for different ways, and at least as far as I've gotten so far, there's been no criticisms of that. I believe that it's going to come, but I haven't gotten there yet, and it's definitely something I think this book needs to address. So at the moment, I guess I'm kind of waiting to see what direction it's going to go. If it leans too heavily into the romance and it doesn't address some of that like animal cruelty, then I'm probably not going to be a fan. But it is still an interesting setup, so I will try and finish that off, as well as making some more progress with this, even though, like, this is getting exciting though, so it's not too bad.
Lazy Sunday mornings, hiding under covers. I don't mind staying in with you. Play your favorite movie, laying right beside me. I don't mind when it's just us two. That corner coffee shop we like to go. Late night walks with you to take me home. With you I never feel alone.
Okay, so I am now 2/3 of the way through Dragonfruit, and I have to say, it still to me feels a lot like generic fantasy. There's some interesting stuff happening with the sea dragons, I guess, like some really quite gross parts actually, and like quite suddenly graphic descriptions. Oh, and actually there's also some of these people have like tattoos that will just appear, or like markings that will just appear, and they can turn into like these companion animal type things, and those seem kind of cool, although nothing much has really happened with them yet. Mostly, even though we are trying to track down a dragon egg so that we can save the queen? Now I think it's the queen. I'm not sure if there's a princess or if I made that up. Maybe I'm still not fully paying attention. But also there's a lot about this prince that we're now spending some time with, and the fact that he's in the middle of like trying to find a wife because it's very important for him to have an heir. And so like all these neighboring islands have sent their different royalty or whatever to try and form some kind of alliance, and now they're annoyed because this other girl is there, and it seems like she's got his attention because they were friends. So they were actually friends when they were children before she got sick, and then her father stole the egg to save her and had to run off because of that, and now she's come back, and it's a lot of like these people that she knew from when she was younger. And now we've actually got like a group of young people going off in this ship to try and find a dragon egg, and I feel like we just got a whole bunch of new characters introduced, and I don't really care about any of them. But at the same time, like, it's fine. I'm having an okay time with it. I am interested to see what's going to happen. I feel like there's a few seeds that have been placed that might turn into something cool, but I guess we'll see. The other thing I've been doing is reading The Wisdom of Crowds. I'm up to page 350, which I feel like is about 2/3 of the way through as well, maybe slightly more. I can't do that maths in my head right now. Anyway, some exciting things are happening. Like there's actually a lot of tension being built to the point where I'm almost concerned about the safety of some of our characters. However, when I think back to the rest of this series, it's very rare, even though this is grimdark, for Joe Abercrombie to actually kill off a main character. He could surprise me, but at the moment I'm kind of keeping that in mind when I worry about what might happen to some of these characters. I think I'll be annoyed if he does kill off certain characters, although it would certainly be surprising, so then maybe I'd be impressed that he was managing to surprise me. maybe. But he has made me care about what's happening at the moment, which is a very big contrast to the first half. So I'm hopeful the ending will do something cool, but I'm also not that hopeful, you know?
We're chasing one another, getting lost in another summer. Never wanted it to end. Now I'm losing all my friends.
So I begin to think that maybe I will never find a quiet spot outside to film, because even this is probably too close to the road, right? Anyway, I've just been on a lovely run. Like, I think when I first moved, I was talking about how I was going to really miss the strip of parks that I used to run through. But now that I've kind of got back to running and I can run a decent distance, it's really quite doable to make it here to the river and run along the river. And it really is a lovely run, although maybe still a few too many people. I did try to film a little bit up the path, and this lady came and tried to hang around where I was filming, so me, who doesn't like filming in public, definitely couldn't do that. Anyway, I did just finish reading Dragonfruit. Oh, I cannot say it. Dragonfruit. I finished reading it, and like, I guess it reminded me why I tend not to pick up YA fantasy. I just think it could have been a lot longer and a lot of things could have been more fully developed. But I also think if I'd read this as a younger person, that wouldn't have bothered me at all. I did end up kind of liking some of the side characters that were introduced, and I liked the way, like, actually one thing I liked is it had, you know, this prince and his woman that had turned up to try and arrange an alliance with him or to marry him, and it kind of initially made it look like this other girl was going to be, you know, antagonistic, like woman fighting over a man kind of thing. But actually it ended up being more of a friendship thing between the women, which I really appreciated, especially in a young adult book. I do think there are way too many people around still for me to be doing this. Anyway, I do think the ending was a little bit convenient, and I also don't think it really dealt with the animal cruelty. Like, it kind of ended up with the sea dragons being protected, but only in a way that was like, because it was convenient to the humans. And there was a lot of talk about, you know, humans having been injured and humans being hurt, but not much talk about the sea dragons being hurt, which I think there should have been. And even if we're not talking about the fact that we're trying to eat these dragons' eggs, there's still these dragon hunters that have been using their scales and all the other body parts, and they did get punished, but only for the humans they hurt. There was no talk of like, well, you shouldn't be doing that to the sea dragons anyway. So that was a little bit disappointing that that wasn't dealt with. But there were some nice parts. Like, it was an okay story. I think it was probably better than I thought it might be in the end, but I guess that's only because I went in a little bit worried that I wouldn't like it. But I do think, like, if you like romantasy and you often read YA and you like dragons, then this is probably fine. But I also don't think you're necessarily missing out if you don't read it. Like, the story won't particularly stick with me, other than maybe the cool tattoo companions that they have. So that's that. I think next I'm going to start One Fell Sweep. I was going to read One Dark Window next, but I didn't download it to my phone. So I have to go with what I have for the rest of my walk home, which will be One Fell Sweep. I probably won't get into it too much though, because that'll be mostly something I talk about in my next vlog. So the only thing I want to finish before we finish this vlog is The Wisdom of Crowds. I was reading it last night. I think I still have 140-ish pages to go. I will say... what was that? I will say... What was I saying? I will say last night, like, I felt really nervous for the characters, even though, like, I'm still convinced that there's no reason to be worried for them. But, well, things definitely go wrong, but I don't know. I'm still in some ways kind of hoping for a somewhat happy ending. Even though Joe Abercrombie is grimdark and all these terrible things are happening, I still think you often end up with a somewhat satisfying ending in some way. Oh my god, those cars are so noisy. So you end up with a satisfying ending, and that's what I'm expecting from this. I'm trying to guess the ending because I feel like it's going to be like the previous book where it's predictable. Although the previous book I was somewhat surprised but also found it predictable at the same time. So maybe that's what we'll get again. Anyway, that probably doesn't make sense, but I'm going to try and finish it. I don't know. I'm imagining I could finish it today, but I know I've got lots of other things to do today, so probably not. But let's keep our delusions going, and I'll update you when I do finish it. Hello, so I have finished reading The Wisdom of Crowds, and you know what? In the end, I ended up quite enjoying this. The second half, I still have to say that first half was a struggle, and I feel like then when the second half got better, it had to really work to like win me over because of that terrible first half. But the second half, I was definitely invested in the story, and I will say I found the ending pretty satisfying. There are some things that happened that I wish hadn't happened, but this is a grimdark book, so that's what's supposed to happen to some degree. And it is in a lot of ways like the ending of a lot of Abercrombie's books, where in some ways, even though our characters are in very different positions, they're also kind of where you might expect them to be. So in some ways the ending was predictable, but again, getting there, I was always worried about what might happen. So I was definitely invested for the second half. I will still say I don't think it was like as humorous as some of Abercrombie's previous books, or even like this trilogy wasn't as humorous as some of his previous books. And I didn't find as many lines to be ones that really hit me, or like ones that I felt were just great lines at like capturing the grim darkness of reality. I didn't enjoy this trilogy as much, but I was very invested in the end, and the end definitely implies that there will be more to the story. I suspect probably following the next generation, but these characters will be around. But I think it'll be a little while till we get that, because Abercrombie's writing some other stuff at the moment. But the ending of this, even though I struggled at the beginning, and I definitely didn't like this trilogy as much as some of the earlier books in the series, still, the ending made me interested in continuing whenever we get that. So I guess that means I liked it. I don't really know how to rate it though, because the first half was probably a 2 stars, and the second half was maybe 4, probably a 4-star. So maybe it just gets a 3. I don't know. Anyway, I'm kind of glad to be done with that series for a little while, because maybe I'm a little bit over it. Oh yeah, the other thing actually that we didn't get in this book was any magic. Like a little hint of some. I guess there was a tiny bit near the end, and maybe a hint that we would get a lot more in the continuation. But is Joe Abercrombie just like teasing me and then not going to deliver? It wouldn't surprise me. The other thing I did do is I started One Fell Sweep by Ilona Andrews, but I think I said I wouldn't get into that too much here because it's going to be in my next vlog, which it will be. But generally, I'm about a quarter of the way in and I'm really enjoying it, which is exactly what I expected. Anyway, let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about in this video, because I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments, or let me know what you've been reading lately. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.